Hi, my name's Tim Macpherson. I am a director of the Angling Trust, and today this is a little programme about mullet. The National Mullet Club have very kindly agreed to sponsor a Mullet Masterclass, and we're down here at Shoreham Port. And what we're going to do is just run through a few of the techniques involved in catching mullet, which, mullet can be a very elusive fish, as I'm sure many people know, but it's one of those fish that everybody seems to want to catch. For my part, I've done a lot of mullet fishing over the years. It's not something I do regularly, so I'm really looking forward to learning a little bit more about how to catch these wonderful fish.
I'm Rich Phillips, representative for the Angling Trust Sussex Marine Region. Why are we doing it? Well, mullet fishing is a fantastic sport. You're using light gear. If you're a coarse angler, it's particularly good because you've already got the skills, you know how to target that sort of species. But it's a brilliant species for the shore angler.
I'm Steve Smith, I'm member of the National Mullet Club, and I'm delighted to have this opportunity to work with you all and with the Angling Trust to set up this event here today. This is the first time I've fished this actual venue. This venue can be float fished, but I'm actually using a feeder method today, and I'll show you some of what I'm doing there. Ground bait then, fellas, are almost invariably bread based. The name of the game here, particularly if you're ledgering, is to not have it too soggy. Alright, that is soaked bread. That's half a loaf's worth of soaked bread in there, and for those of you close enough, there is no spare water in there. That is just all the water is absorbed. I mix it with some ground bait here. Normally I would use 50-50 white crumb, brown crumb, just the stuff you can get from any tackle dealer of any repute at all. I also mix it with a proprietary ground bait here for no other reason than the fact that this puts a bit of scent into the water, and on a relatively large venue like this that can sometimes be a difference. So this is 1 part white, 1 part brown and 1 part that stuff, which I've actually mixed into a large tub, which I do at home. So what we do then, we've got our ground bait here, and we just shovel a sensible amount into there. The important thing is to coat all of the bread with the ground bait. Okay, now that is coming along quite nicely. It will stiffen over time, so you have to be aware that whatever consistency it is now, in 10 minutes time it will actually be a bit stiffer than that. You can vary the proportions here. The more white you put in, the more concrete setting it becomes. The more brown you put in, the more crumbly it becomes. So if you're finding that 50-50 isn't to your liking, it's too stodgy and rigid, then you can vary that. That's not looking too bad, and I'll give you a clue. When you squeeze it, it doesn't stick to my hands. Alright, my hand is clean, and I've just rolled my hand in it and it's still clean. Alright, so if it's sticking to your hand, you've probably got it too wet and gooey. That's, for our first attempt, is about right. I'm going to use that with a frame feeder. This is what I have set myself up today. We'll try not to hook Tim in the process of this. Yeah. I've got a frame feeder here with some booms that I've been using. This was the method that was successful 20 minutes ago. I'm just going to squeeze that into there until it just about covers the frame feeder. You needn't be too fussed about it. But what I do, and I think this definitely helps, is to take some liquidized bread. If you've just chucked half a loaf of liquidized bread into a blender or something, and I just roll that in there, and that will do us nicely. If you've got any left over, you can chuck it in there. When that hits the water, that liquidized bread will come off pretty much at surface level and drift down through the water column. This stuff will pretty much sit on the bottom, and sometimes you can actually see the twitches on the ledger where the mullet are pushing the feeder around on the bottom. They're not actually attacking the bait, they're just taking the bread off the bottom there. When it comes to hooks, this is actually a size 9. Reggie's advice for a wide game 8 is very, very sound, and I recommend that's where you start. Just take a loaf of white, pinch a hole in the middle, and there are kind of 2 basic techniques here. One is where you lay your hook on the surface of the bread, and then you roll it up like a Swiss roll and pinch just above the eye of the hook. That puts a bit of buoyancy in it, so if you envision that lying on the bottom, this is just going to be bobbing around here, just helps it a little bit, keeps it clear of some of the crabs. This is a fairly open venue, so I'm fishing with 2 hooks. On the second hook I use a smaller bait. That seems to work better. You sometimes get a snatch as it goes past. Just an alternative to that Swiss roll method I showed you. Again, lay it on there and just pinch a small bait like that sits in the middle of the water. If you envision, that's the kind of arrangement on the bottom with the angle typically like that. So that's what I'm doing, and that's what I was fishing from first thing this morning. Got the 3-1 on the bottom bait. Beware of the crabs on the bottom bait. If you find you've brought a crab in on the bottom bait, do please check this hook length. That's 5 pound fluoro I've got on there, and it doesn't take much of a crab to actually do some meaningful damage to that. And you'll find that, you know, nothing worse than looking into it, it just goes ping before you've made any contact at all. I'm lobbing that out about literally 10 yards out there. I can supplement that by just chucking handfuls of that ground bait out there. Remember my opening remarks, fish over your ground bait and ground bait where you're fishing. Alright, so we'll do that at some point in a minute. So that's what I'm doing there. If you prefer a cage feeder, then feel free to have whatever rig you want, a running rig or whatever, but you can fill the cage feeder up directly with the liquidized crumb. All right, if you've got you can pack that in, and experience will teach you how tight to pack that in, that it just comes apart, so you don't pull the whole thing back in and none of it's any use, and nor do you want it all disappearing the instant it hits the surface. Sometimes you can use a compromise of the method. I'm not very good with that crumb in cage feeders, so I actually bung up one end of the frame feeder with some of this stuff, and then it only comes out of one end, and that way I seem to get better results and a more time distributed flow of the liquidized thread. Right, 5 pound monofill. This rig here is essentially, if anything gets hold of that, it's just going to go. So make sure that you've actually got your clutch set to give you enough time to react to the fact that the quiver tip's gone round. Alright, if you set that clutch solid, you are asking for trouble, and I have seen rods in the briny, so you have been warned. I'll just flip this out now. When I was just concluding my remarks, when something was obliging enough to lap itself on the back end. This morning was my first mullet of the season, so I don't think I got all the answers, far from it. Right, there we go. Okay, that's 6 pound monofilament main line, 5 pound fluoro on the snood. That's a size 9 hook, but you can have anything between about a size 12 if you're targeting fairly small fish, and about a size 6 if you fancy your chances using some chunky bait, but entirely up to you. And that's about it as far as the thick lip intro is concerned. Right, thin lip fishing is as different from thick lip fishing as chalk from cheeks, you know, it's just bears almost no resemblance to it. Thin lips do very occasionally take bread. You've got about a 5% chance of catching a thin lip on. Right, let me talk about thin lip is spinning. It's a MEPS number 4. If you want for this COVID stuff, I'd let you all have a go with the rig. Basically, it's number 4 MEPS. Nothing religious about number 4. I fish with 5s or 3s or even I've taken the treble hook off the back because they're not very friendly to the fish, and replaced it with a number 2 Aberdeen. Now you can use match Aberdeens if you want, but the mullet do bend the match Aberdeens, I can assure you. So something with a decent bit of oomph for standard Aberdeen is what I used there. Having removed the treble, I attached the 2 Aberdeens with 20-pound amnesia. Now that's not for the breaking strain, it's the fact it doesn't kink. If you put, say, a 4-pound mono on there, you'll only get about 2 casts out of it before it's twisted beyond any reasonable and sensible use. This is braid. I fish with braid to get much better contact with the fish, and you can feel the knots and the taps. Some of them are schooly bass, so make no mistake, you're not necessarily into it. Do not strike the taps, just keep winding, because as I'm going to show you in a minute, the mullet will grab the tail end of the worm and gradually work their way up to it until they realise something's afoot, and then the fight's on. Okay, so do not strike the initial knocks and taps. If it absolutely slams the rod tip over, then clearly it's grabbed the whole lot. Right, now the name of the game here is to put your bait on such that the thin lip mullet can't grab too much of it without getting hooked. I'm using king rag here. These are some that I dug on Wednesday. I store them in a mixture of dry sand and vermiculite, which is a kind of insulating material and just keeps them dry. And as you can see there, I have a bit of bladderwrack that came from the place where I dug them. I just keep that moist, and there is enough there for 3 baits. Don't put the whole damn thing on, or you'll be through your worm store in no time at all. So, maddies are good, and you obviously bunch the maddies on the hook, and it's a small
It's
palm
like
of worm.
bad rag, so it's a smaller version, only grow about that sort of big.
And they're very effective, particularly in these waters. So what I've done there, now before I finish putting that on, just to observe, when I tied the hook on, I left the tag of the knot sticking out. That's not me being careless, that's to help hold the worm in position. So I now slide the worm up over the top of that tag, and that acts as a kind of small hook in effect and holds that worm in position. And I'm now going to pinch that so that the hook is 2/3, half, 2/3, 3/4. You can develop your own kind of style on the way back from there. The worm should be straight, not bent around the hook bend, or it will spin, and that's not very convincing, and the mullet are well away from that. So that's what we're actually looking for. And this particular rig can be fished at any depth. Obviously if you fish it too deep, you run the risk of snagging something that's on the bottom. You can run it along just below the surface. The number 4's got a decent bit of weight in the spinner itself. The worm is surprisingly heavy as well, or at least this one is, and that will give you more than adequate casting distance as well. Vary the speed of retrieve, which will also vary the depth you're fishing by the height that you put the rod tip above the water. So that's one method of spinning for thin-lipped. It's the method I prefer. I went with a mate of mine from the Mullet Club, however, on Wednesday, and he outfished me with this rig here. So let me show you this rig here. Swivel, you can adjust the depth by just retying this bit here if you want to. Weight that goes with the bubble flow. He likes the beads. He loaned me this rig, which was very kind of him, so I could show it to you here today. Small spinner, just flaps around down there, and he's got a silvered number 2 on there of some description. I don't know what make that particular hook is. That then means that you can cast this preferably with the wind behind you or over your shoulder. It's really good in those kind of circumstances. That rig can be cast into the wind if you keep it low and fast. Smooth is the key word when casting this rig, all right? You want it to go up and over and up. Because it's got a float, you can let it settle if you wish, and then retrieve it at various speeds until you find one that's actually working and getting some knots.
That was Steve Smith with a great demonstration of various methods you can use to catch mullet. He didn't demonstrate flow fishing, but quite a few anglers used that method today, including myself. We also have Reg Phillips, who was demonstrating a couple of methods that have really worked well for him.
Following on from Steve's brilliant demonstration there, this is a rig that I started using inside Shoreham Harbour Basin. I basically adapted it from a course session for tent fishing, and I thought this has got a good chance. I've been trying for ages to catch mullet, no success, but when I saw this rig, I thought I'm going to give it a go, and it has worked extremely well. Okay, so basically there is your sliding swim feeder, your cage, yeah? As Steve says, you pack this out with liquidised bread to your liking. The looser it is, the quicker it'll fall out. I like to pack it in quite firmly, and if need be, I'll mix it with a bit of the water in the lock to give it a bit more stick. And so there you've got your size 8 wide gate hook. Come up just a little weight, the tiniest three-way swivel that you can find, with another flounder hook off the top. I had a lot of success with this in the early years fishing in this harbour. The reason why I changed the rig setup is because along with the bass and the mullet that I was catching, I was getting plagued with a load of crabs. So I then changed it to this setup, which is basically the very same setup, except that you've got two hooks above your weight as opposed to one up, one down. Okay, and with this setup, I would use balls of ground bait. I'd use probably about a size of that, nice and smooth, so consistency, so that when it went down in order, it broke up as it went all the way down, as Steve explained to you. Not too stodgy, not too dry. If it's too dry and a lot of air in it, it just sit on the surface and let it float away with the wind, and all your ground bait goes there, and all your fish go with it. So you've got to get that consistency right.
In all, we had over 25 anglers who turned up, some of them experienced, some of them not so experienced, but they all learnt something, and we caught quite a few fish as well, and decent sized ones too. If you want to find out more about the National Mullet Club, then go to their website, which is thenationalmulletclub.org. If you want to find out more about what the Angling Trust does for anglers, or you want to join, then go to www.anglingtrust.net